I'm not going to start with any easy questions.
What would you do if you couldn't fail?
I was vulnerable in the sense of I was just who I was.
In my journey as an entrepreneur, I really found who I am as a human.
When was I proud of myself today?
The cold exposure, it conditions the inside of our body to literally adapt.
The mycelium, which you can think of as the root system.
Whatever happens in the gut happens in the brain, and whatever happens in the brain happens in the gut.
Finding the grace and the humor.
Absolutely had mentors, absolutely 100% had coaches.
Work at a gratitude practice.
90+% of the decisions that we make today actually stem from fear.
Allow ourselves to have imperfection.
What the hell am I doing? Can I really do this? Is this really worth it?
A wake-up call to me that I could not try to be something I'm not.
For me, it's really inspiring people to step out. And you don't have to step all the way out.
We're getting real deep.
That's what I like. What's your purpose?
Nothing starts without a plan. Nothing ever goes to plan.
If we can bring a practice into our lives that helps us be more vulnerable.
Entrepreneurship, I truly believe, to anybody on this call, is grit.
When people are on the path, they shine.
We so often convert things into flaws as opposed to strengths.
Chaga is actually the most antioxidant rich food on the planet.
Ayahuasca is basically a brew of different plants that grow in the Amazon rainforest.
I'm so thrilled that this content is getting out there, that you guys are promoting bold and vulnerable message and aspirations for people, because I hope that we can all really live that every day.
Hey, this is Jessica.
And Svetlana, and you're listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast,
where we aim to inspire others to live authentically through sharing the bold and vulnerable stories of peak performers across a variety of industries. Welcome to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast. Today we have Svetlana on the hot seat, my co-host, and we will be discussing our life pillar of love, which is a juicy and vulnerable and raw and authentic and transparent and all the feels topic. And I'm just so excited to dive in because we've got some really fun things that we're going to chat about today. So, hi, Svetlana.
Hi.
All right. Well, let's dive right in. So speaking of love, I know you've had kind of a long time love of your life that's been a consistent and a constant for you. So, and that's George. And so I wanted to know kind of your history with George. How did you guys meet? How long have you been together? What's your story?
Yeah. Talk about putting someone on the spot right away. Well, first of all, before I even answer that question, I just want to say one thing for the audience listening. George and I have been together for over 14 years, maybe 15. I lost track because I stopped counting. So we met when we were 16. So I was 16 and he was 17. We met in high school. And one of the things that I really wanted the audience to take in today, and my intention for this show, is that love has different seasons, different phases and different evolutions of growth. And I feel like I've dated many different people within this relationship, and I believe that he feels the same way because we both have evolved so much. So we're not the same person we were when we were like 16 or 17, but I knew that he was my soulmate and my true love the moment I laid eyes on him. He was like a caricature of everything I'd ever wanted, and it's like I just felt this instant connection. And so yeah, we met in high school, and we just have a long history together. We've been through a lot of challenges, from being teenagers in lust to evolving, growing, mature adults, to breakups, getting back together, some time in between, to some infidelity, some emotional, there's been emotional affairs. We've been through it all.
First of all, thank you for sharing that, because I think that there is a stigma with women who share things like infidelity and, emotional affairs or reactions or whatever you want to call them. And the community of other women will shame them for that. Why did you stay with this person? Why are you still with this being? And I just want to commend you for sharing that, because you've obviously worked through it or in the process of working through it, because you're still with George. And, we'll talk about it more soon, but starting a family with George. And, I feel very similar in some of the things that I've gone through. So I feel like, you and I have really connected there on, having this one person that we've, been connected to on a soul, cellular, spiritual, universal level that we keep coming back to, or keep in the back of our hand as, that is my person. And so I just commend you for sharing all of that to start, because I think that that's a lot. Thank you for all the nuggets. So you guys have been together for a long time. So tell us how you met. I know you mentioned it was when you were 16, but what were the circumstances about how you met? Do you remember?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm gonna answer that question because that's important. We were in high school, but I want to say one thing. You know how you mentioned that a lot of people will say, "Why would you stay with that person? What are you thinking?" And I always say, it's not logical, and I'm not perfect either. And when you just know and you can see the person for who they truly are versus, who they whatever suffering they're going through in that moment. And that's what I saw. I couldn't explain it. And when I say emotional affairs, I mean, I had my fair share of going out and looking and seeking to be understood by other guys during those times. And let me also mention for the audience that we were also really young too when this was happening. Right now we're 30. We're in our 30s. And this was all happening when we were really young. And it's important to explore, and he needed to explore and I needed to explore, and that's okay. As long as you both come back to each other and are okay with that and can let that go and let it shift you and evolve you, then it's totally fine. So to answer your question on how we met and what were the circumstances. So we met at a Jewish high school. I had just, graduated middle school, and I needed to go to a high school. And at the time, the public school system was messed up. And my parents were just like, we're going to send you to private school. And I was in this sort of rebellious stage. I wanted to go to this gateway school, alternative school. It didn't work out, wasn't for me. So they ended up sending me to Hebrew. And that's how I met him. That's how I saw him. And I instantly had this crush on him. I instantly had this connection with him. But we didn't start dating right away, obviously. So many girls liked him. I mean, he's a very good-looking guy. He's very attractive. The whole school was attracted to him. This whole tiny little school wanted him. And I'm not just saying that, but he's a very attractive guy. And I was just sort of like, okay, well, I'm gonna, back off. And I wasn't very confident in myself even. I didn't really maybe even believe that I could be with someone like him, even though I knew deep down, like, oh, I'm gonna date this guy. But yeah, that's how we met. Those are the circumstances. And he'd been going there since he was a kid. He'd been going to like a private school since he was younger.
Awesome. And so I'm curious, did he notice you, or like how was the circumstance with him? Because it's like you're painting this picture, like here's this attractive guy in this school with not a lot of people going to it. Like what do you know what was ever going through his mind? Have you guys ever talked about that?
Yeah, he said that I was his type. He was instantly attracted to me too, and that I was his type. And He thought I was so cute. He still remembers what I wore. He was like, your K-Swiss with your beige skirt, with your little, what did he say? What else did I think I had a case. I used to wear these K-Swiss shoes, and I'm not advertising for them. And this beige long skirt, because we had to wear long skirts because this was a conservative school. And yeah, I mean that's basically what he would say. He's like, you were so cute with your little beige skirt and K-Swiss. And I think, I had this like blue shirt or a blue backpack or something, and he's like, your little backpack. Like, he remembers what I wore. I was
That's awesome. That's a twin flame for you. Very I mean, it's so funny because guys are very visual, so I love that he remembers that, like, that's the memory. It's amazing. And I know you mentioned earlier that you guys evolved together and then you also evolved separately, so I kind of want to dive into that a little bit more for the listeners who are either with a partner or maybe separated from a partner who they hope to get back together with soon, and or people that are just not with anyone at all but are searching for somebody. What are the things that you did to evolve both together and separately that maybe could relate to listeners out there that are trying to do the same?
Man, there's so many pieces to that puzzle of how we evolved and what we did to evolve together and separately. What I will say is that we started to evolve more so separately before we started to evolve together. So there were a lot of issues going on when we were around 24 or 25. He was heavily addicted to opioids, and I was heavily in this state of mind of, oh my God, why is this happening to me? How could you do this to me? I don't deserve this. Why are you doing this to me? I just kept saying to me, why are you doing this to me? And so it was this continuous nonstop looping of the same question. And then one day it just hit me and I said, well, what if this isn't about me? What if this has nothing to do with me? How can I help? And so that piece we sort of evolved together, or more so I started to evolve. But then it turned into there was still this whole codependency factor of it, right? Eventually what happened was we broke up for a 5-6 month period of time and we didn't talk. And that really gave me space to learn how to self-soothe and to really learn about myself and to really learn that a lot of the things that were happening were not my fault because I blamed myself for a lot of it. And nobody was really at fault. He was going through his own suffering and he had to have his own version of medicine at the time. That was his medicine. That is what he needed. And then we reconnected a few months later. I actually reached out to him and I wrote him this whole letter. And I mean, I never fell out of love. I could never fall out of love with him. I actually am so much more in love with him today, right now, than I ever was. It's growing and evolving. But once we got back together, things just shifted. We just both were on this growth phase, and he had gotten clean, like really clean this time. He'd really taken control of his life and taken his life back. And this is a story that he can share with people. He doesn't even know how to identify with a drug addict anymore. And there are people out there that are in NA or AA that can disagree and say once an addict, always an addict. He doesn't see it that way. And good for him. He doesn't even know what it's like to go back there. He's completely healed himself with help and with self-help. but we just went on this growth path together. We started listening to audiobooks together, to different podcasts, videos, anything can about Tony Robbins, Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Esther Hicks, like every main person in the book. What's his name? Marcus Aubrey. Every person you can imagine.
Aubrey Marcus.
Aubrey
Marcus.
Aubrey Marcus. Every person you can imagine. Sorry, Aubrey Marcus, if you ever listen to this. Every person you can imagine.
I listened to his podcast this morning. So that's how I knew.
Yeah, every person you can imagine.
Like literally.
So funny. That's why we're connected.
Yes.
But we would just listen and grow together. And, and then there were phases where I would outgrow him, or he would outgrow me. But then we'd come back and meet each other, like the other person would force the other person to level up. So we're always on this growth path and this journey together. And I mean, it's always a growing journey, just being together too, and learning about one another. I feel like I'm still learning till this day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that is just a true testament to the fact that some healing does have to happen on your own. And, especially for him, if he was heavily addicted to a substance, there's no way he could give as much as he would need to give to a relationship. And so that break and that evolution was 100% necessary for you guys then to find each other again, find your way back.
That's something I want the listeners to know too, is if you're with somebody that has any sort of addiction or an issue, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. You mentioned like some of these rough patches. How did you guys get through those? Like, what did you do to get through some of the rough patches? And maybe you can cite some examples.
Which one?
Oh gosh, pick one of the many, I guess. But yeah, no, I'm sure that there's many examples. But maybe some of the infidelity that you touched on, because I think that's probably a hot topic for people that are listening. Maybe how you got through that and how you overcame it and came back to each other.
Yeah. I just let it go. I just knew that it meant nothing, and that it really hurt in the moment. It was very painful. And I always believe that we are in some shape or form co-creators of what's going on, of what's just in general. We are a co-creator, right? We're energy. I believe in energy, and we are in this field of energy, and we're just always co-creating, right? So maybe in some shape or form, it's what I needed at the time. It's what I needed to learn. It's what I needed to grow, because it made me much more compassionate and much more understanding and a much more accepting person, if anything. Because there are people out there that can say, oh, I would never be with a guy that cheats on me, or vice versa. I would never be with this type of woman if she's this way. And, it's really easy to be that judgmental person, and it's usually the most the really judgmental people that have no idea what they're talking about. But until you're in that sort of circumstance or have been through it, you really don't know what you would do. And if you can never be with somebody like that, then that's cool too. That's fine, but that doesn't mean that a person that stays doesn't value themselves or values themselves any less than you value yourself. It's just that we chose different paths. So for me, it was painful. I was also really young. We were like 16, right? So hormones, emotions all over the place, right? But then it was just one of those things where I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because it happened. And a lot of it had to do, it had nothing, what I realized is like, this had nothing to do with me. This was his own battle, and it's something that he needed to heal. And as soon as he healed that part of himself, he didn't even want to do that. He didn't even want to go out and and engage with other women.
So theme here, is something that maybe in the past you were placing blame on yourself for some of these actions, and then you kind of took a step back and you said, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with me. This person is healing. And it takes a really strong and powerful person to actually take that step back and, disconnect from that and put themselves in the other person's shoes and say, this person does love me. And it's not like, hey, if they love me, they wouldn't do this. That's not a reality, right? Because that's like your expectations will always.
Yeah, because then you're putting conditions on your love.
Exactly.
Like the only way that you love me is if you do X, Y, and Z. And that's just not how love works. And you can love somebody, and there are so many polygamous relationships out there where people are, have multiple partners, and that's cool, whatever works for you. But love is unconditional. And like I said, I had my fair share of contributing and co-creating to this as well, right? So I would talk to other guys, and I would flirt, and I would, I knew what I was doing at the time. I knew that I was seeking something, where I possibly wasn't feeling fulfilled when we were during these times. And I take full responsibility for my part in it as well.
Yeah. And so what would you say would be the one thing that listeners can do to help get through rough patches like that?
It's when you're in it, when you're so far deep in it, it's really hard to see that there's this light at the end of the tunnel. But if you can take a step back and take yourself out of the situation and see like a bird's eye view of what's going on and check in with yourself, like really check in with yourself and zone out, tune out any advice, anybody's opinion, and listen to yourself and to your intuition, which is what I did. This is what worked for me. So my intuition was telling me something so totally different from what everybody else was telling me, and from how the circumstances looked. The circumstances looked really shitty in these moments. They did not look promising, but my intuition was telling me something different. This is the journey that I needed to go through. And I'm so grateful for it, because it has definitely made me a so much more compassionate and loving and understanding person. So if you can just do that, if you can just tune out the bullshit and what people have to say and not ask for any advice, you'd be doing yourself a huge favor.
I love that. And so how's your relationship today with George? How do you guys navigate the challenges that come your way now?
It's really, it's obviously not what it was. Like I said, I feel like I've dated, 10 different people, and he probably feels like he's dated like 500 different people, because my personality changes like 20 times a day. I think that that's part of being in the feminine, where you can go from hot and cold, especially being pregnant. So I am pregnant right now. So that's one evolutionary phase of our relationship. But it's overall, we have so much love for each other, and we really care about each other on a soul level. It's so much more than just let's have sex. It's so intimate. And yeah, I mean, we have challenges. We will argue. There are days when we're arguing every single day. But, we always come back to, I love you so much. And our biggest thing is, and I'm not going to say that I've been 100% with this, because, I'm human, even though I love to go to my soul level and be in my highest vibration. The biggest thing is, I don't like to go to sleep angry. And, I don't think any couple should ever go to bed angry at one another. So that's my one piece of advice for listeners, is never go to bed angry at each other.
And so you touched on some big news, and I know we mentioned it in your family life pillar episode, but you're pregnant. So, are you excited about the new addition to the family, and, how has that shifted the energy between you guys now that you're about to be parents? Did you guys have any family issues, regarding not being married and the whole stigma around that? And so maybe we can first get into like how excited you are, and then we'll talk about the stigmas.
Yeah. It's a huge shift. It completely changed everything. It completely changed him, especially as a man. I feel that once a woman is pregnant and you're with this woman, I've noticed, men are just they're beautiful, they become so protective and so they just want to take care of you, and I feel very taken care of. So it's definitely shifted for the better. I'm taking advantage of it. He's cooking for me like all the time. And he's just taking really good care of me, like just giving me massages and just making sure that I feel okay. And I think that he's really excited to be a dad, and we just found out that it's actually a girl.
Yay! I know you already told me the news, but I'm very excited for our listeners to hear that Svetlana's having a girl. We're so excited. Oh, that's awesome.
And he's really excited to have a girl too. He really is just so over the moon about it.
I love it. And I can't wait to have another episode after the birth and just hearing how excited that he is and that you are. But I think it's such a joy to see a father be a father. And I think we'll touch on it when it happens. But congratulations again. And maybe now let's talk about the second piece to that, which is, you guys aren't married. And I know that that's some people's belief, is that you have to be married in order to have children. It's not my personal belief. I know obviously it's not yours or George's. So I wanted to touch on that just so that we can get into it, because I think a lot of people have pressure there, whether it's religious pressure from your family, your friends, your grandmother, whoever it is. So let's dive into that maybe.
Yeah, it's something that people have been asking me for such a long time. Oh my God, you guys have been together for this long and you're not married. What? So the first thing that I say is, who made up that rule? Who told you that that's the rule of life? The game of life is that you have to get married. And if you're feeling pressured to get married, and keyword pressure, I would ask yourself or question yourself, is that what you really want? Because I used to think that I really wanted this big, luxurious, extravagant wedding when I was younger. And what happened was during that time, actually, when we had that 6-month breakup, I remember during those times I used to feel so before we had the 6-month breakup, before those times I used to feel so kind of like lonely and upset, and just, everybody's with their like boyfriend, or they're getting married, they're getting engaged, all this stuff. And then when we had that break, I realized I started questioning these values and these ideals. And I started wondering, wait, is this something I really want? And now I'm not saying that I don't want it, but is it of such high importance to me? Like, what's really important to me? What makes me less married or less in a relationship, being with somebody, being in this partnership for, and being so committed to one another than somebody that's married, than somebody that decided to exchange rings and get a piece of paper from City Hall, right? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with marriage if that's what you truly want. but it's not something that is very important to me right now. Like I feel like we're connected and we're already married. So I don't really need that validation from anyone or any from anyone really. So yeah, there are definitely stigmas, and we definitely had, some family being like, you guys need to get married, the baby needs to be born into a family. We had some family members say that, and I remember saying, well, how is the baby not being born into a family? I was like, what's different? Explain to me. It's a lot of old school, old paradigm views, and I'm not saying that him and I will never get married. I'm just saying that it'll happen on our terms, not on somebody else's terms. And I just think that it's really important to really get to know yourself and like, what do you really want? Like, why do you want that big extravagant wedding? For me, it was like I would see this, right? And I would see all these like fairy tale movies and all this stuff, and you think that that's what you want, and you think that you want to get married because everybody around you is getting married, and you start to feel like you're left out and you want to be a part of the tribe and you want to fit in. But again, check in with yourself. What do you really need? What is it that's really going to fill you up? Because if you're feeling down and miserable and your relationship isn't going well and you think a marriage is going to fix it, well, I've got some news for you.
Yeah, and like not only if you think a marriage is going to fix it, but like the financial burden that comes with a marriage, like, and I don't think there's anything. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting married. I think that the biggest issue that has, come up for people in our generation is that you're expected to have this extravagance. You're expected to spend this money. And even if you don't want to spend that much money, it does pile up and pile up. And then, what did all that money go towards? It was one day, and of course you're treating your family and treating your friends and getting together for a gathering. And that's lovely. But how much time did you spend with those people? How much were you present? And most of the time, the answer is not that much. And so it's something that our society has structurally placed on us because it will help people combine assets, and it helps people, it helps the government track taxes and things like that and track children and families. And I think it's become something that is systematic more than about love. And it's become something that is financial more than about love. And that's a sad thing to say, that it's like economic and financial, because the other piece of it is the religious piece, which is like completely almost thrown out the door at this point because of all these other factors that get involved. And, some people that are highly religious aren't having weddings anymore because it's so expensive. And they're just going to go to the courthouse and get a piece of paper. And like you said, what is a piece of paper to you? When it goes so much deeper than that.
Totally. And, if you even go back to centuries ago, it was about, bringing different kings and queens together. It was all basically what you said, political. It was very political.
And incestual.
Yes. And incestual.
But we don't have to get into that.
and yeah, there are still parts of the world that have arranged marriages where people don't even know each other, and they're forced into it. So luckily we live in a country that gives us the freedom of choice, and we don't have to worry about that, and we won't be stoned for making different choices. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we may have listeners that are global that don't have these opportunities and are sitting there saying, what are they complaining about marriage for? Like, I would die to marry the person that I wanted to marry, right? And so we're not shunning marriage in any respect, way, shape, or form, but we're just analyzing it and diagnosing it and and saying, hey, here's what it's turned into in our generation, in our society, in, where we live, which Svetlana's in California. And that's just the stigma that's put around it. But going back to you and George and love as a couple, do you guys have anything that you love to do together and that you are excited about in terms of the family being able to get to do together?
What do we love to do together? I feel like we do so much together, but we really love to take walks together. I love taking a walk with him. I love going hiking or going into Golden Gate Park and really exploring this beautiful part of San Francisco that I feel like a lot of residents that have lived here, including myself, don't really take advantage of. And it's so beautiful. It's as if you're walking into another part of like just another not city, what am I, just the wilderness. It's like you're in the wilderness. Like you're not even in the city anymore is what I'm saying. It's as if you left the city.
Yeah.
So what else do we like to do together? We like to listen to audiobooks together. We like to just watch anything that is inspirational, of high vibration. We'll listen to Esther Hicks together.
What else?
And Esther is a relationship speaker.
No,
is that
Esther. No, that's
Esther Perel. I was
Esther
like,
Hicks is Law of Attraction, but we've listened to Esther Perel. She's amazing. So and she has a whole thing on infidelity.
Both amazing.
Yes, they're both amazing.
Esthers are great.
Totally.
I got them confused. So, and what are you guys reading anything together right now, or doing anything together right now?
He actually recently turned on a really awesome audiobook for me, but he didn't tell me the name of it. And he told me the name of the author, and she actually lives in San Francisco, but I don't know the name of the book, honestly. So, yeah.
No worries. Yeah.
But he's reading an Osho book right now, like separately for me, and I'm back to rereading one of my favorite books, which is Happy Pockets Full of Money. It's a great book for anybody out there that is just looking to understand the quantum mechanics and abundance a little bit better and how to do that for yourself. It's a really great book. But lately we've just been, he cooks for me, but sometimes, we'll cook together, go on drives together. I don't know. We're kind of boring. I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, we're kind of boring.
That's not boring. I feel like some people long for that, walks with their significant other.
We're going to a movie this weekend with my cousin. It's a double date.
There you go. Are you going to see The Lion King or what?
Yes, we are.
I haven't seen it yet, so no spoilers. That's cute. I love double dates. Yeah, so I guess, speaking of infidelity, whether that's physical or emotional, whatever you're going through, do you have any specific examples of like practical or science-based steps in order to heal from something like that happening in your relationship and what it takes? Because I know that we kind of just nonchalantly brushed over it, but I know that it takes a lot of energy and vulnerability on both sides to heal from something like that. And there was probably a lot of, attunement, reattachment, things like that needed to come back into your life. And so I wanted to maybe touch on how you bounced back from that and how you healed from that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when I think back to that time, I have absolutely zero, there's nothing that triggers me related to that time, right? There's any emotion that was in my body is now gone, right? Which is key right there because we store emotions in our body. And even for him, right? He'd carried guilt on his part, right? In his body. And actually, I'm not even sure if that's something he let go of. I think it's something that he's not proud of. And there are things that I'm not proud of, but you know what? You live and you learn, right? But it's so interesting because you talk about the practical steps and, maybe something that our listeners can do to help them heal from something like that. The thing that really the visual that starts to come up for me when I think about infidelity and when I think about, what we went through is it's interesting how that's not even a pain, or there isn't even a pain that I carried. It's not a pain that I carried for as long as the pain that I carried of my parents' infidelity.
Wow. Okay.
So
wow.
There's a lot of things that I saw growing up, right? So this is the other thing too for our listeners, when you look at your reality and what it's made up of and what it's comprised of and everything going on in your life and how did it come to become this way, be interesting to just look at your whole life and how you grew up, because during our most formative years we're learning everything from our families or caretakers, right? And that's basically what I saw growing up from both parents. So I actually had to do a lot more healing related to my parents' relationship than I did even in my own. That was so much easier to let go of than it was to let go of my parents' infidelities. And
why do you think that is? Do you think that it's because you had already gone through that and so you had that strength already within you?
I just think that when we're little, we see our parents as our superheroes, and we think that they're just maybe that they can do no wrong, basically, right? So when you start to realize that they're human and that they make mistakes, it hurts. It's confusing. And I think as a kid, you start to take it on and wonder, what could you have done, or how could you have, did you play any part in this, and stuff like that. So I've really had to heal from that and learn, and I'm still learning, like, boundaries, right? Because there's a lot of boundaries that were crossed or not even there when I was a kid, and how my parents' relationship went. And I mean, they definitely don't have the perfect relationship, and it's interesting because through their infidelities, and that's both of them, they've stayed together. I've never engaged in the physical act of it.
That was my next question.
Yeah, so I've never engaged in the physical act of infidelity. For me, it was just mostly like emotional, just seeking, right? Wanting attention, wanting to be loved, wanting to be understood, wanting to be seen and heard, right? During those moments, because I didn't think I was being seen, or it was interesting, the moments that I was being seen and heard, and he was more present, were the moments where I was starting to pull back. So it was always this game. It was always a push-pull game. And it was something that I saw growing up, actually. Now that I even reflect on it, I saw a lot of that growing up. So it's like I was repeating it. It's like I was repeating history. We were both repeating history because we both saw it growing up. And that was part of our evolution and our growth. It was, hey, you know what? We don't have to be our parents. We don't have to repeat this story. Let's heal from this. Let's release this pain. Let's heal the lineage. Let's do what we need to do. Let's breathe into this. Let's really feel this, like, let's really feel let's not ignore this feeling. This feeling's coming up. Why is it coming up? Why is it there? Breathe into it. Breathe into it. Where does it feel like you're tense or contracted?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a few things
And
there.
how could you release them?
Yeah. And, you know, even just as simple as what you just mentioned, the breath work, the meditation, just thinking on it, being present with those emotions and letting them fill you. Because if you don't and you suppress them, then that can bring up, you know, ailments in your body, in your mind, in your soul, epigenetically, or you can pass that on to your kids, etc. And so, you know, you mentioned healing genetically, healing from that pain, and you mentioned just breathing, simple as breathing. And so when we're talking about, you know, practical science-based steps to heal, maybe that, you know, the best advice there is just to sit with the emotion and to really deeply feel it and let it out and cry and do what you need to do and yell at the top of your lungs, whatever you need to get it out, right?
That was the biggest thing, was me coming face to face with my emotions, because I was very angry. I spent a lot of years extremely angry, not even knowing why I was so angry. And it's because I was suppressing so many emotions. And that's when I just needed to basically come to a forefront and come face to face with myself, and really just start to address these emotions and actually let them move through my body and feel them and allow them to move through me. And it didn't always work, you know. I would need to, there were different things where I would need to maybe, I mean, there's so many techniques that you can do to let go of a painful event or a painful emotion, just by, you know, taking this bird's eye view of going back there and asking yourself, you know, what was the lesson here for me? What did this teach me? How did this happen for me? And how can I be better than this? What am I choosing to do for myself moving forward? Just asking yourself these questions and journaling it out, and uh, just really taking the time to like do the true self-care. And true self-care meaning not the bubble baths, right? Not the green juice, but really going in and feeling your emotions and not pretending like you're separate from them, or that they're not important, or that they can be shoved away.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's such a vulnerable topic, and I think that some of the listeners, actually all of the listeners, I feel can relate to not infidelity for everyone, but just deep pain on some issue with a loved one. You know, everyone's been hurt. Everyone has felt that, whether it's from putting somebody on a pedestal to not feeling love back, to loving too much, which I don't even believe is possible, to feeling that, you know, the after effects of infidelity, or to being the one who is in the wrong in a relationship, or who caused infidelity, and feeling the pain of what that feels like, and that weight and that heaviness. I think that the cure for it is what you just mentioned. It's all the same. It's sitting with those emotions, sitting with those feelings, and really, you know, taking the time for some self-care.
I used to do this thing, right, where I would be like, I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me. And that's a form of suppression. That's a form of burying it deep and pretending like it's not affecting you. Rather than saying something like that, what if you just admitted that, wow, this really hurts. That is so painful, or that just broke my heart, or this makes me really angry. Just notice how that feels so differently in your body. Get connected to your body. This is just something for the listeners.
Yeah. And I think even, you know, even that just reminded me of like Sheryl Sandberg, and even like Alison Armstrong just lost her husband, and, you know, losing love and being able to come back from that. And, you know, Sheryl wrote the book Option B, which is just like, you know, dealing with everything day by day and not having any expectations for yourself, and letting yourself feel, letting yourself cry, and being okay saying, I'm not okay today. And I need to take some time and some space for me today. And that can be with anything. So it can be with loss of love too. I want to commend you though, because, you know, you're here talking very vulnerably about your your long-time relationship. I mean, 16 years is a crazy amount of time, no matter if it was on or off. I mean, that's just a long time to know somebody. And I mean, you've referred to George as your best friend, your twin flame, your soulmate, every single word, you know, some of them being cliche, but I really truly believe that you guys feel that. And I just want to commend you for, you know, putting your shit out there and really owning it, because I think some people are scared to do that because they want this perfect image of how their relationship is supposed to look in social media or whatever you want to, you know, wherever. And I think people feel the pain of rejection from a society or community or tribe more than they'll feel the pain of actually going through the hurt. And so I just commend you for calling out your own shit, because nobody else can call you out now, because you've already called yourself out, if that makes sense. And I just commend you for it, because I think it takes strength.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it makes total sense. It's like nobody can say anything. Like at this point, it's like, okay, you know, when somebody, if somebody decides to go that route, which hasn't happened, but if somebody decides to, if there's a hater or something, that decides to say like, wow, you're so pathetic, you know, it's like, cool, all right. It won't do anything to me. There's nothing that you can say that'll hurt. It's like I will actually just be sending that person lots of love, because they must be going through a lot to say something mean. So yeah, you're right. Nobody can really say anything to me. It's like, okay,
you're just in such a good space.
That's how you feel.
Yeah, that's how you feel. I feel love. Yeah. So is there anything else that you want to add about George? Any, like, you know, tidbit?
He's an amazing person, despite what, you know, if you have your views on infidelity or whatever, right? He's an amazing person. I'm an amazing person. I'm a good person. I'm loving, honest, and so is he. And, you know, so are you, Jess, obviously. Like, we connect so much, like you and your man. And I just want to say again that people have this idea that they need to date, right? And it's cool, like date, like enjoy your life, do your thing, right? But I just noticed there's this pattern that I always see where these serial monogamists out there that date. Once they hit the 2-year mark, it's like they break up. Then they find someone else. They hit the 2-year mark, they break up. And it's just over and over again. And what I notice is that usually around that 2-year mark, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something scientific. I haven't done any research on it, but there must be something out there. That's like, usually there's that honeymoon phase. And then you start to notice things, right, that you may have swept under the rug, little quote unquote red flags or things that trigger you or bug you, right? But you have to remember that the person that you're with is essentially your mirror. They are your mirror showing you who you are, right? So the things that I may be getting angry or upset with George for are really things that I need to work on, or that I'm angry or upset for with myself, right? And vice versa for him, things that I trigger him with, right? And you can date the same person. You can go on thousands of dates with the same person and learn something new about them. There's always something to learn, and there's always different evolutions, and there's always different phases. Like, I am still learning something new about my partner till this day.
I love that you mentioned that. And I think too, what you mentioned, you know, people being so quick to change partners. And, you know, in my opinion, and again, I don't have any scientific studies that back this up either. It's strictly an opinion. But, you know, I think when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And, you know, the minute a relationship may be too quote unquote difficult or uncomfortable, our society in general and our generation is taught that, okay, discomfort is bad, get me out of here, I need to leave, like fight or flight, I'm out. And in reality, when you take the time to work through struggles and pain and healing and anything that you need to work through, you come out on the other side with this person, not only in a stronger relationship, but as a stronger friend. And, you know, if you're really truly looking for a partner, you want to go through that struggle with them. You want to keep fighting. You want to keep learning. You want to keep growing. And, I feel the same way about my own relationship, and it's if you didn't continue to be on a path where somebody's going to challenge you to your highest and best self, and you're going to do the same to them, you're going to challenge them right back and say, hey, you're not at your best self. You could be better. You could be doing this. And not in a critical way, not overly critical. I mean, some criticism is healthy, right? But not being overly critical, but just saying, hey, like, you're not at your best yet. And you never will be, because we're always growing, we're always evolving and changing. And there's always going to be, like you mentioned earlier, different phases of your life. And so I think it's so important to just push through the discomfort. And on the other end, there's so much joy and happiness in finding this partner that you can fully trust in every type of scenario, even if the trust wasn't there in the past or if it was broken. I truly believe it can be healed.
I believe in that too. And yeah, that goes back to like the infidelity. It's like the trust, it's there, even if it was, you can rebuild, right? Or you can start over, you can lay down the foundation that you want. And, for anybody out there that maybe,
No, you go ahead.
For anybody out there that may be listening to this and maybe you're coming to some sort of revelation and you're like, wow, I'm that person where I keep dating, and as soon as things get a little bit difficult, I swipe left or I swipe right, because we live in this society now where everything is so much about instant gratification, and no, I don't want it to hurt or be hard or whatever, right? And it doesn't have to be hard. You can change your language around that. It can be a little challenging, but you can change the meaning around it, right? But I'm going to ask you something. I'm going to ask you to ask yourself something. Every time that you do this, every time that you're changing into a new relationship, when the going gets a little bit difficult, when the person starts to trigger you or call you out, what are you running from? Ask yourself that. What are you running from?
Because most of the time it is something that's internal. That
Totally.
Maybe you're fighting back on. Wow. Well, I know we touched on a lot of things, generational issues with love, or not issues, but challenges, and infidelity, and long-term love, and growing and healing, and growing separately and growing together, and what to do as a couple to make yourself feel joyous and happy, like taking walks in your city, and all the things. So, Svetlana, thank you so much for sharing today on your life pillar. And, although we did touch on a lot of the things that were maybe harder to talk about, this is the Bold and Vulnerable podcast, so that's why we harped on some of those things. But do know that Svetlana is correct in saying that George is just a beacon of light, and I'm sure that you could find him connected through her social media. But George is also somewhat of a healer himself for males who are going through energy shifts, and he's just a beacon of light. So thanks, Svetlana. Appreciate it, and so much love to you and starting your family.
Thank you. I'm so excited to do your love pillar where we get bold and vulnerable.
Thanks, guys.
Shout out, share this episode, please. Share our wonderful Bold and Vulnerable podcast. We really appreciate you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast. For more information on today's speaker, please visit us at boldandvulnerablepodcast.com.
And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading the love by being bold and vulnerable. Thank you. We love you.